Good morning, students. Today we are going to start the new topic of the last chapter of microeconomics, that is the market equilibrium under perfect competition. In our previous video, I have taught you the chain effect with perfectly elastic supply and perfectly inelastic supply. And now today I am going to teach you the chain effect of supply with the perfectly elastic demand and perfectly inelastic demand. So let's start. Today is chapter is market equilibrium under perfect competition. So today's topic is change in supply and equilibrium price in some exceptional cases when the demand is perfectly elastic. Okay, when the demand is perfectly elastic, when the demand is perfectly elastic. Students, yesterday we have in our previous video we have discussed the market equilibrium and the situation was when the supply is perfectly elastic, right? So with supply we have discussed both of the situation, increase in demand and decrease in demand. Today we are going to discuss when the demand is perfectly elastic and we have to uh, point out the market equilibrium in this situation. So the first situation is condition is demand is perfectly elastic and the situation is increase in supply. Situation is increase in supply. ओके तो बेटा अब अगर ये वाली सिचुएशन है तो हमें क्या करना है? कुछ भी नहीं करना है, बहुत इजी है, सेम एज वी हैव डिस्कस्ड अर्लियर. कुछ नहीं करना. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी हैव टू ड्रॉ द curve of market equilibrium. Curve of market equilibrium. What is how we draw the market equilibrium curve is very simple. It is S1 and it is D1. The intersection point of supply and demand is market equilibrium point, right? But in this situation, their condition is when the demand is perfectly elastic. So the demand curve will be different. कैसे हो जाएगा वो? हमें क्या पता है कि when the demand is perfectly elastic, it means it is parallel to x axis. तो हम कैसे ड्रॉ करेंगे उसे? हम उसे ऐसे ड्रॉ करेंगे. Suppose this is supply is this S1 and demand is perfectly elastic. Perfectly elastic का मतलब है that is it is parallel to x axis. This is demand D1, right? अब इन्होंने सिचुएशन क्या दी है? इंक्रीज इन सप्लाई. सप्लाई को इंक्रीज करना है. इट मीन्स डिमांड को हम कुछ नहीं करेंगे. इट इज P1 प्राइस 1 and it is E1 intersection point and it is Q1, right? तो अब हमने क्या करना है? कंडीशन इन्होंने क्या दी है? सिचुएशन क्या दी है? इंक्रीज इन सप्लाई. इंक्रीज करना है सप्लाई को. इट मीन्स there is nothing to do with the demand. Demand will be as it is, whatever it is, right? we have to only deal with the supplies. तो increase अगर supply करनी है तो when the supply increases the curve goes down. तो supply का curve कहाँ जाएगा? नीचे की तरफ जाएगा. Means ये हो गया आपका S2. S2. So where is the next intersection point? The next intersection point is this. And Q2 is this. And what the price is? Price will be the same. Right? क्या हो गया कि supply increases, quantity increases, but the price remain constant. It is the chain effect of perfectly elastic demand increase in supply, right? Now the second situation is, situation B is decrease in supply. When the supply decreases, क्या करेंगे? कुछ नहीं करेंगे, सेम वही बनेगा, कर्व बिल्कुल वैसा ही बनेगा. This is S1, this is demand D1, it is P1 and it is E1 and it is Q1, 0, X and Y. What the situation is? The situation is decrease in supply. It means there's nothing to do with the curve of demand, only we have to deal with supply. The supply is this. First market equilibrium point is this, but the supply is decreasing. When the supply decreases, the curve goes upward. So upward जाएगा अगर supply का curve, तो कैसे जाएगा? ऐसे जाएगा. That is S2. And next equilibrium point we are getting here is E2 and the quantity is this Q2. It means when the supply decreases, quantity decreases, but the price remains constant because it is perfectly elastic demand. तो जब भी perfectly elastic demand रहेगा, price हमेशा constant रहेगा, केवल supply और demand ही, supply और quantity ही affect करेंगे. Is it clear to you all? Now the situation will change. Next situation is when the demand is perfectly inelastic. When the demand is perfectly inelastic, that there is no change in demand. What doesn't matter what the price is, there is no change in demand. It's perfectly inelastic. When ED is, for your revision, when ED equals to 0, it is perfectly inelastic. So the first situation is, situation A is when supply increases. When the supply increases, so the curve is like that, X and Y, that is S1. Now perfectly inelastic demand. When the demand is perfectly inelastic, the demand curve is vertical to y-axis, is like that. It is D1, perfectly inelastic, and it is P1, price, it is Q1, right? And now the intersection point where the supply and demand intersect, it is equilibrium point E1. Now they are saying when supply is increases. So when the supply increases, the supply curve goes down. It is like that, S2, S2. Next intersection point is this. It means it's E2. And this is P2. And this is Q1. It means when the supply increases, price decreases and quantity remain constant. तो हम क्या कह सकते हैं कि in perfectly inelastic demand curve, when the supply increases, price also increases. And this condition is also getting fulfilled in this. It doesn't matter the price is higher or low, demand is always constant in perfectly inelastic demand, right? Now the next situation means situation B is when the demand is demand when the supply is decreasing decreases when the supply is decreases. So this is the demand curve, this is the supply S1. Demand is perfectly inelastic, it means vertical to y-axis, D1, it's Q1, and the intersection point is market equilibrium E1, and the equilibrium price is P1. Now the condition is when supply decreases. So when the supply decreases, the curve goes upward. This is S2, it is decreases. So next intersection point is this E2. यहाँ पर intersect हो रहा है ना supply और demand के साथ. So next intersection point is this. So price is this P2. तो हम क्या कह सकते हैं कि when the supply decreases, price increases, right? And this is the market equilibrium in perfectly inelastic demand curve. Okay. Now the next situations are simultaneous change in demand and supply in market equilibrium. For this, the next situation is simultaneous change in demand and supply. Simultaneous change in demand and supply. Simultaneous change in demand and supply means the changes occurs in the same time कि same time पर ही आपकी demand increase या decrease हो रही है and आपकी supply भी increase या decrease हो रही है at the same time. So what will happen with the curve? So the first situation is simultaneous increase in demand and supply. Simultaneous increase in demand and supply. Simultaneous increase in demand and supply. So the situation is, the first situation is increase in demand is greater than increase in supply. What's the first situation? Is increase in demand is greater than increase in supply. They have given us the condition first. The condition is simultaneous increase in demand and supply, कि हमें increase करना है demand और supply को in the same time. Plus the situation they have given us is increase in demand is greater than increase in supply, means demand should be increased in a greater quantity in comparison to supply. So what's the curve? Curve will be react like that. 0, x, 1. Firstly, what we are going to do is to draw a market equilibrium point with supply and demand. It is S1, it is D1, it is intersection point, that is E1, in market equilibrium price, that is P1, and quantity is Q1. Now the condition is simultaneous increase in demand and supply, means अब हमें demand and supply को बढ़ाना तो है, but with the following the situation, increase in demand should be greater than increase in supply, कि हमें supply demand को ज़्यादा बढ़ाना है, supply को कम बढ़ाना है. It means firstly we are going to increase the demand. So when the demand increases, the demand curve goes upward. So that is D2. D2. Okay. Right. After that, we have to increase the supply also, but we have to increase in less than demand. अगर हमने demand को इतना increase किया तो supply को हमें इतना सा increase करना होगा. It means when the supply increases, demand supply curve goes downward. Means this is the gap. We should decrease the gap here, and this is the S2. So where we are getting the next equilibrium point? The next equilibrium point is this. It's E2, because it was D1, it was S1, it was E1, and it was P1. Next, demand increases, D2, it is D2, and supply increases, it is S2. So next intersection point is this, and this is Q2, and with the dot 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 line we get the P2. Mark the curves. Increase in demand, increase in supply, increase in price, and increase in quantity. This is the whole curve. It is a little bit lengthy and little bit confusing. Tomorrow I'll arrange some more colors to erase the confusion. Till then, you revise the topic and practice the curve more and more you can. And if there is any confusion, you can ask in WhatsApp group or you can call me also. Take care.